Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at the 2024 presidential election and doing another flip analysis, this time in Wisconsin. If you haven't watched my first episode, I guess, it's on Pennsylvania, and if you would like to check that video out, go do so right now. If you pause it, I will still be here after you've watched Pennsylvania, but the topic of today's video is going to be Wisconsin, and Wisconsin is an interesting state. It was one of the closest states in 2020, and it's a pretty good flip opportunity for Trump. We're going to talk about it today, but he has a lot of paths to victory in this state, and if he can win it, it'll be huge for him. So just to talk about the implications of a red Wisconsin in 2024, Trump would probably be favored to win the election. If you told me Trump won Wisconsin on election day before the results came in, and I was like, who won Wisconsin? You said Trump. I'd probably say he'd win the election. That's because Wisconsin usually votes with Pennsylvania. They were only 0.5% apart in 2020. So if he wins Wisconsin, he probably wins Pennsylvania, just likely. And from there, he only has to win a couple more states. So let's say he takes Nevada, which is probably the next state off the board. If he wins any of these three states, which he won North Carolina in 2020, so that's not a hard lift at all, he can win the election. So Trump has a lot of paths to victory when you give him Wisconsin. He can also kind of just do a Sun Belt strategy. Maybe he loses Pennsylvania, but if he wins the rest of these states here, and renders Nevada irrelevant, say Biden wins Nevada, he would still win. And this map right here is actually the most common. I didn't have a channel back then, but if you go back and watch 2019 or early 2020 election predictions before we really thought Georgia or Arizona or North Carolina would be super competitive, most Trump victory maps looked like a blue Rust Belt minus Wisconsin, because Wisconsin was the most conservative of those states in 2016. So it's just kind of an interesting fact when you look at the path to victory. But again, Trump winning Wisconsin would be huge. I don't think it would maybe tip the election to him unless it was very close, but it would have good implications for the Republicans across the board. So that is kind of what I think would happen if you won Wisconsin. And obviously 10 electoral votes, not a ton, but still pretty helpful, and it would be a huge boost to morale for Republicans if they won it back. So let's talk about why they lost it in 2020. Because it was a very close race. Trump could have easily won had he just done a few things better or improved in a few areas. And the best place to start, I think, is the WOW counties, which are these large suburbs of Milwaukee, Waukesha, Washington, Ozaukee. And they were pretty bad for Trump. Obviously, he won all of them, as you can see, but they shifted 6%, 2%, and 7% to the left in 2020. And that's not really what we wanted to see from Trump. Obviously, these are suburbs. They're a bit more educated than some other areas in the state, and they are perhaps left-running in general. But again, Donald Trump should have done better here. And Mitt Romney, who in 2012 lost Wisconsin by like 7 points, won these counties by significantly more than Trump did. And obviously, it would be unfair to expect a Republican in 2020 or 2024 to get Romney 2012 suburban margins. But what I will say is that Trump could have definitely done better here had he run a more efficient campaign. I think he had a lot of self-inflicted wounds in 2020, and post-2020 has gotten even worse for him, I think, between the unpopularity of his candidates in the midterms and his denial of the election results. I think a lot of people in the suburbs were not receptive to that, and those are more self-inflicted wounds. But let's talk about the areas that he can improve in, and that he probably will improve in. So the best example of, maybe areas that he can do better in are the drift list counties, which are over here. It's a mostly working class area, historically been very Democratic, but in 2022, the district flipped red for the first time in a while. And we also saw Tony Evers did win the district, the governor's race very narrowly, but I think in most other races it did vote Republican. So it's certainly a right-trending area. And in 2020, Trump actually did better in the majority of counties in the drift list area. He did worse in La Crosse and Eau Claire, which are the more urban areas, but in the rural counties over here, he did much better. And that's a good sign for him. I think he can improve there. And I think that if he does that, maybe if all these counties, excluding La Crosse and Eau Claire, if they swing 3 to 4 points to the right in 2024, that would be huge for Trump. That would, on its own, maybe flip the state back, even accounting for losses in the WOW counties. And when you go over to the northern part of the state, Trump could also do better there. He actually did start to swing some of these counties right. Some did trend towards Joe Biden, but others did swing towards Republicans. But the interesting thing here is that when you go to rural Wisconsin, the counties are not as conservative as they could be. So just to go to a red-leaning swing state, right? Like, go to Texas, for example. And obviously, Texas voted for Trump by 5.5. He would not win Wisconsin by that much. But if you go to rural Texas, the counties, 88% for Trump, 93% for Trump, 95% for Trump, 83% for Trump, 79% for Trump. So they're all very, very Republican. And even a state like North Carolina, which was closer, the counties are 66% for Trump, 80% for Trump, 75% for Trump, 77% for Trump. And so in Wisconsin, it's different because these rural counties up here are not as favorable to Trump. He won most of them, but this one he only got 57%. This one he only got 56%. This one he only got 63%, 61%, 64%, 67%. So his ceiling, like the county he did the best in the rural areas was this one, was 73%, and he only won like 2,000 votes. So it wasn't really that substantial. And that's just not where you want to be as a Republican in a state like Wisconsin that's so competitive because, again, Republicans win, especially in this day and age, especially in the Trump era. They win by getting good margins out of the rural areas. Talk about the working class areas, which, again, are favorable to Trump. I just said that in the driftless region, but the rural areas are huge for him as well. And if he's only getting, 56 to 65% of the vote in these rural counties, it's not going to cut it, especially if Joe Biden's improving in the much bigger Milwaukee suburbs. So that's the problem Trump had in 2020, and it's going to be a hard one to fix. I'm not going to say it's easy, but these counties some of them did swing right. Some of them were pretty favorable to Ron Johnson in the Senate race last year, and I think that overall we could definitely see Republicans improve here in 2024. So that's kind of step 2. Now the final step would be just this coastal area. And this is kind of I'm not from Wisconsin. I don't have a ton of experience in the area. I've only been to the state once, so I don't have a great feel for the geography. But when you look at the politics of the areas kind of between like Ozaukee, which is kind of when you're leaving the Milwaukee metro area, and Green Bay, it's pretty conservative. And in 2020, Trump did all right there. The swings were minimal. I would say he did worse in Green Bay. He did worse in the Door Peninsula. But he did better in some counties like Kewaunee, which I'll be honest, I don't know a ton about. It's a pretty red one though. But in the larger counties, right, like Sheboygan, Winnebago County, which is where Oshkosh is, and Brown County, which is where Green Bay is, Trump actually did worse. Not Portage, geez. Winnebago swung 3% towards Biden, and Green Bay swung 3.5 points towards Biden. So overall, I would say these areas have some working class populations. They have some voters, Black and Hispanic voters that Trump can potentially improve with as well. He can't win them, obviously, but he can do better. And if Trump truly, truly puts in the effort to win over voters in mid-sized city and it's not only Wisconsin, it applies to Michigan and Pennsylvania and Ohio. But if Trump really, really improves with mid-sized cities in the Midwest, Flint, good examples of this would be Green Bay, Oshkosh in Wisconsin, Flint in Michigan, maybe Youngstown in Ohio or Akron in Ohio, right? Like we know, not big cities, but not small towns either, just mid-sized cities where Biden actually did pretty well in 2020, right? Like we look at the counties he flipped in Michigan, he did better in a lot of those areas outside of Detroit. And in Wisconsin, he did better in Oshkosh and Green Bay. If Trump can revert those numbers back to 2016, he'll be in good shape to win Wisconsin. So that's kind of the broad path to victory there. So the best way to kind of look at those results and how they could happen is through exit polls. In 2020, Trump only won the white vote by 6%, and in 2016, he actually won it by significantly more. He won it by, as you can see right here, 11%. So that's a 5-point swing with white voters who made up 86% of the electorate both times. And that's a pretty considerable thing, especially when you remember that Wisconsin as a whole, most of the swing voters in Wisconsin are white. They're in the suburbs, some of them are in working class areas, some of them are in the mid-sized cities that I mentioned. But again, if Trump can do better with white voters, he will be obviously in a better position statewide, but he'll also be likely to improve in the areas that I highlighted earlier, right? Like when I talk about the driftless counties, those are mostly white, especially rural areas. If he can increase turnout and have them make up maybe a larger share of the electorate, that would spike his percentage with white voters. So he can do that a number of ways, but I think they'd all benefit him. And then in terms of swing voters specifically, because I do want to talk a little bit about them, in 2016, independents did back Trump by 10%, but in 2020, they were pretty hostile to him, with independent voters in exit polls saying they backed Biden by 12. So we saw a 22-point swing with independents in just 4 years against Trump, and that was pretty bad for him, likely costing him the state as well. So maybe if he can bring that down, And this is the problem he has. He's not any more popular than he was in 2020. And obviously Biden's a lot more unpopular than he was in 2020. But Trump is just very, in my opinion, he's dug himself into a pretty deep hole. But either way, I guess you could say looking at the results from independent voters across most swing states, Biden did better with them than Clinton did. And that obviously was the difference in the election. But Trump is really going to have to hammer Biden for things he's weak on, like his age or like his, I guess, charisma, which Trump is obviously far more charismatic and entertaining than Joe Biden is. So that's something he can maybe work with. But again, independent voters were pretty hostile to Trump. And the same thing with moderate voters. In 2016, moderate voters chose Hillary Clinton by 10. So she won them, but she did not do as well as Joe Biden, who won them by 22. So we saw a 20-point swing with independents and a 12-point swing with moderates, and that, again, was definitely the difference in the state. So to me, that is why Trump lost Wisconsin the second time, and obviously he's going to have some trouble appealing to these moderate voters because, again, they don't like him. He hasn't polled well with moderate voters, and the only way he's going to win them back is by really dragging down Joe Biden, which is possible, and I think it's his best path, but just to kind of recap, it's what he's going to have to do. So that's where I stand on Trump in Wisconsin. He's going to have to kind of do better marginally with every demographic. He only lost it by 21,000 votes in 2020. So he can do it. He can certainly do well enough to win statewide, but he's going to have to do better in a lot of areas, and it's going to be difficult. So that's where I stand on Wisconsin. I think Trump maybe has a 40% chance of winning it, which is not bad. It's bordering toss-up range, I guess you could say. But he's still an underdog, and I think people need to realize that. So that's my Wisconsin video. Again, let me know what you think. Do you think he's going to win it in 2024? Let me know how you think he does it, and suggest which state you want to see next. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.